Hello everybody, Maven here, and today we have to talk about the Geomag Stabilizers. They're back, baby. So on the first day of release of the season, we did that video where we tested all of the updated exotic armor and weapons, and in that video we tested Geomag Stabilizers to try its new abilities. So the new ability it got is Ionic Traces now grant you some amount of super energy, and it needed that. It needed some kind of neutral game play because before, as just like a super exotic, there was no reason to really have it equipped. It was the kind of exotic where you use a different exotic, and then when you have your super, you just go to your menu and swap to it. But now we have a reason to keep it on. So way back in the day, it had that ability where you could sprint to top off your super. When you were at like 80% of your super, it basically gave you the rest of your super for free. And ever since losing that, the exotic's been kind of falling off. But now that we have this new ability, it is back and it is viable, and we can start spamming Chaos Reach again. Maybe not as much in PvP, but in PvE for sure. So let's break down the build. Don't forget to drop a like, and I hope you enjoy. Alright, so as you know, Geomag Stabilizers pretty much double the duration of your Chaos Reach. And Chaos Reach also got a buff recently where sustained damage on a target with it will summon down these lightning strikes. So Geomag is hitting really hard these days, and we'll do some damage testing with it in a bit. But first off, the reason why we're all here, collecting Ionic Traces now grant us super energy, but how much super energy is it? Well, as you can see here, it really doesn't grant too much super energy. It grants as much as an Orb of Power does, not the most impressive thing in the world. But when you take into account that Arc Warlock can generate way more Ionic Traces than Hunter and Titan can combined, it really adds up very fast. And taking a look at the subclass here, we actually have 4 different ways to generate Ionic Traces. The first of which is the aspect Electrostatic Mine, so defeating targets with arc abilities or defeating jolted or blinded targets creates an Ionic Trace. Additionally, Ionic Traces make us amplified. And then there is Spark of Discharge, so our arc weapon final blows have a chance to generate an Ionic Trace. And then Spark of Ions basically says the same thing as Electrostatic Mine. Defeating a jolted target creates an Ionic Trace. And Spark of Shock allows our grenades to jolt, and our Chain Lightning melee also jolts. So those are proccing both Electrostatic Mine and Spark of Ions. This works for our weapons. So basically every single thing we do makes an Ionic Trace. You cannot avoid it. You will always make traces on every kill. But we haven't even gotten to the best part yet, and that brings us to our weapon of choice, the Delicate Tomb. This thing has insane synergy with Ionic Traces. Tempest Cascade says that when we collect an Ionic Trace, our next shot with this thing is going to jolt a target. And remember, jolted targets will create Ionic Traces. Additionally, this thing's trait, Final Blows with this weapon have a chance to generate an Ionic Trace. So you pair that with Spark of Discharge, so our arc weapon Final Blows can generate an Ionic Trace, and you are generating multiple Ionic Traces per kill with this thing. It just spits out Ionic Traces left and right. So you put 2 and 2 together, you pair that with the Geomag Stabilizers, and you are flooded with super energy. Now, some of you guys may be curious about your potential weapon options with this build, and let me tell you, I did some testing with the Risk Runner, the Trinity Ghoul, the Cold Heart, Centrifuge, and the Brigand's Law with Volt Shot. And in my experience, the next best weapon was the Risk Runner. When you have the Arc Conductor perk active, this thing slays out super hard and it hits like a truck. And you can actually proc Arc Conductor on your own with your pulse grenades when you throw them near your feet. Also, I would just use the Risk Runner in general if you're doing any activity with a bunch of fallen enemies, because they tend to have a lot more arc damage. But if not for Fallen, then I would just use the Delicate Tomb in every other situation. Now, I'll show a side-by-side comparison in the Hydroponics Delta with the Delicate Tomb versus the Risk Runner so you can see how fast they can charge their supers. And the Risk Runner performed a lot better than I thought it would, despite the Delicate Tomb being the weapon with all of the Ionic Trace energy, because the Risk Runner doesn't actually jolt. The description says that it chains lightning, but it's not jolt. I think it's just because it has a higher RPM and also that chain lightning damage, and the fact that it doesn't have to reload, it's just generating a lot of damage numbers. And that's how super energy works in Destiny, is the more hits you do, the more damage you deal. You're generating more super energy, which is why the Wish Ender generates a ton of super energy, because it shoots 3 arrows per shot as opposed to other bows shooting 1. So that's kind of what I had in mind for the Risk Runner. That's probably why it's doing so well. And so both of these weapons were able to charge the super in around 47-ish seconds. So like I just said, if I was going up against Fallen, I'd probably use the Risk Runner, but if not, I would use the Delicate Tomb. Now some of you may be curious, what happens when we run out of special ammo? Well, we're just not going to run out of special ammo. We're not about to slay out with the hung jury. The only reason I have a primary is because we loot more ammo for our special when we only have 1 special, and also that gives us a ranged option. but we're actually going to be running the good old infinite special setup. This is what I love to run when I'm doing a build based around a special weapon and I want to have non-stop special ammo. So step number 1, run charged up on your chest. Step number 2, stacks on stacks on your boots. Step number 3, special finisher on your class item. So you perform a finisher, it consumes 3 stacks of armor charge and drops you a brick of special ammo. It is not a finder brick, although it looks like one. It is actually a real brick. So stacks on stacks allows us to get 2 stacks of armor charge instead of 1 when we pick up an orb of power, and because of various mods, we have a lot of ways to generate orbs of power. And then with charged up, we can hold 4 stacks of armor charge. So we only need 2 orbs to achieve that. Now when we perform our special finisher, that's going to consume 3 stacks and put us back down to 1 stack of armor charge. So then when we have 1, we just need to find 1 orb that puts us back up to 3, and we can perform another special finisher right away. So this is a very nice setup to be able to generate tons of special ammo, not only for you, but for your teammates as well. And on top of that, if you're doing an activity where you're not too scared of dying, you can sacrifice resist mod to run harmonic reserves. So that allows your delicate tomb to hold like around 26-ish ammo, and that also helps out your heavy option, which we're running the Wendigo as well. So it helps out both things. And then if you wanted to sacrifice one of your 2 surge mods, you could run a copy of Scavenger as well if you wanted to further help it out. So yeah, this setup allows you to just pretty much have infinite special. You can run through activities just like non-stop spamming your delicate tomb. If you find yourself running low on ammo into the single-digit numbers, you can just simply get an add into finisher, finish it, and you are good. And now with all of that out of the way, let's do a little bit of DPS testing with the Geomags. So typically I like to do testing against Carl, but then this happened. So yeah, we're going to need a beefier target. So let's go to Pharizia, the ogre boss of the Grasp of Avarice dungeon. So first things first, before any of the testing, I wanted to try out just the Geomag Chaos Reach alone. And you can see just how long the Geomags make your Chaos Reach last, and those lightning bolts that it summons down. And we end up with a total of over 600k. It actually does a ton of damage. Compare that to a lot of other supers in the game. Geomag is definitely one of the top damage dealers. And now it's time to do a big boy damage test against the most meta DPS strat in the game right now. Well of Radiance with the Wither Horde, Cartesian with Boss Spec, Apex Predator with Impact Casing and Boss Spec, and Bait and Switch procced, along with that Reconstruction. So this is as meta as it gets, and let's see how it can compare. So we end up with over 1.6 million. That's pretty good. It's going to be hard to compete with that, right? Well, let's move on to our Geomags along with our Delicate Tomb and our auto-loading Explosive Light Wendigo with Adept Big Ones. And in this clip here, I also had a buddy join in simply just to distract Pharizia so that Pharizia doesn't focus me, because Pharizia melts you pretty quickly. So simply, my buddy was there just to be a distraction. So they were in no way contributing to my damage. And there it is, over 1.7 million, as opposed to Apex Predator's 1.6 million. Now, I know there are a few different factors here. It wasn't perfect, neither of the DPS phases that I did there were perfect. So in the Apex clip, as you know, I didn't have Gallarhorn, but Gallarhorn did just get a big shadow nerf recently. I don't know if you guys heard about that. And also, I didn't have on Lunafaction boots, and I didn't have on Surges. But in the Wendigo clip, I only had Explosive Light ×2 procced for only 2 shots of the Wendigo that were buffed. Like, the rest of it was just base Wendigo damage. It's a pretty good damage dealer. But I also did place my Arc Soul Rift like midway through the DPS phase. I should have placed it at the start, so I could have had that Arc Buddy helping me for longer. And on top of that, it was a healing rift and not an empowering rift. If it was an empowering rift, it would have just completely blown the Apex strat out of the water. So both of my clips here had their problems, but still, the Wendigo comes out in the lead for sure. So if you're curious if this build can still hold up with raid damage DPS, it absolutely can. Plus, in a raid, you're giving that Arc Buddy to 6 people, so that actually adds up pretty well. But also, I don't know if you heard, but the new Trials Grenade Launcher The Cataphract has bait and switch, so that is absolutely going to deal way more damage than our Wendigo, especially when you pair it with Envious Assassin and just completely overflow all of your reserves into the mag. It's going to be insane. So this strat is only going to get better once we get our hands on that GL. Now let's quickly go over the rest of the stuff that I didn't explain earlier. So we got the Arc Buddy Rifts, of course, and then Spark Resistance to make us tankier when we are surrounded. I feel like that is required in addition to 100 Resilience, because in PvE you got to be as tanky as you can. And for the rest of our mod setup here, we got Arc Siphon. It does say Harmonic Siphon. It's the same thing for our Delicate Tomb double kills to make orbs. And then we got Ashes to Assets because it is a 100 discipline grenade spam build, so you want to get those nade kills as much as possible to get free super energy. And then we got Dynamo, so when you place down your Arc Soul Rift, make sure to place it near ads so that you can get a little bump of super energy there. And then we got Firepower, so our nades make orbs. Then we got Momentum Transfer and Impact Induction, so our melee ability and our grenade ability feed ability energy into each other. And then I have a Harmonic Resistance here for Arc Resist. And then, like I said, the reserves, but if I was doing more difficult content, I would replace the reserves for a different resist mod, depending on the activity and the threat modifier. We got double Arc Surges here with time dilation to make them last longer, and then a copy of Reaper so that we place down a rift and our next kill makes an orb. And then I got tier 100 Resilience and Discipline. Obviously prioritize Resilience because this is PvE. Then I went tier 7 Intellect and put the rest into as much recovery as I can. Now, you do not want to go beyond tier 7 of Intellect, and if you did not see my video on how stats work, I'll link that video in the card up above. I highly recommend checking it out, and any player can benefit from watching that video. And in that video, I go over why you don't want to invest beyond tier 7 of Intellect. There is a big diminishing return, so tier 7 is a sweet spot and you want to stop there. Now real quickly, I just wanted to mention a couple honorable mentions for this build. So there is Spark of Amplitude, which is amazing. While you are amplified, your double kills make orbs of power. You make tons of orbs with this fragment, but it's just I could not find the room for it on this build because it felt like Spark of Resistance was a little bit more important because tankiness is everything in PvE. But if you're doing easier content where you can survive better, then maybe you can substitute out Spark of Resistance for it temporarily. And then also the second honorable mention is the Power Preservation mod for your helmet, which if you are willing to sacrifice Dynamo for that, and you're doing an activity with a lot of ads, then you can use your Chaos Reach to generate so many orbs of power for your teammates. So it really all comes down to preference, what you want to run. Now for the gameplay loop with this build, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. You pop your Arc Buddy Rift and then you just slay out with your fusion rifle. That's all there really is to it. Pop your super any chance you can because you're gonna get it back pretty much every minute, so you don't have to worry too much about saving it. And that's basically it. Like I said in the intro, Geomags is back on the menu. It's an amazing pick for endgame content like Grandmaster Nightfalls. You can absolutely shred through champions and help shred through boss phases as well. And there is also an artifact mod this season, Unstoppable Fusion Rifle, which is good for your Delicate Tomb. However, I will mention, big warning, it's bugged with Delicate Tomb. Unstoppable Fusion is not working on Delicate Tomb. So if anybody wants to report that to Bungie, be my guest. And also, since it is Season 22 as this video is released, I thought I'd mention that this build is also amazing in the Altars of Summoning activity. Since you run into big chunky bosses every few seconds, it's great to have that Chaos Reach ready to help you just blow through those kinds of activities where you run into big old yellow bars every few seconds. So, as always, I will leave a dim loadout link to this build down below in the description and the pinned comment if you would like to give it a try. And if you have any buddies who are Warlock mains, I'd appreciate it if you share the video with them. It really helps out a ton. And I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to hit the like button and drop a comment, because interacting with the video in different types of ways like that really helps out, it helps the algorithm. And if you are new here, please consider subscribing. We are extremely close to hitting 30K, and we're about to get there, hopefully in the next few days. And with that, I'll catch you in the next video. See you later.